My name is John McCrae. My company is Stand Up Marketing, and I'll come back to why I've called it that just a little bit later. I come at things, Hugh said a very interesting thing, that it's about experience. And for me, over my career, I've worked with some very large companies. I've worked with the NHS quite a bit. I worked with companies in Switzerland and France. But increasingly over the last decade, I've been working with small businesses. And I completed some 3,000 projects in that time. That's kind of audited projects where I've been fully paid for. When I work with small businesses, and I mentioned this to Hugh just before we started, from my experience, it's not the little things that small businesses get wrong. It really isn't. You're very good at the detail, very knowledgeable about your subject. It's the great big things like, why you? And they're the things that worry me a bit, because you really get one big shot at making it in the marketplace. And if you miss that target, then that's where things begin to slide. So today what we're going to do is really focus a little bit more on that. So if I kick off by just saying a simple question to begin with, what the heck is it? Because I'm slightly concerned nowadays, and Hugh mentioned social media at the beginning, and I would just like to just make a couple of, in answering this question, make a couple of points clear what I consider marketing is not. For me, Facebook is not marketing, nor is Twitter, nor is YouTube, nor indeed any social media whatsoever. And nor, while I'm on the subject, is websites, nor advertising, literature, direct mail, or even direct email. None of those are marketing. What they are is the most incredibly valuable channels of communication. I call them the Big Bang. And what I mean by that is, once you have got what you really want to say, there are no better forms of communication than those previous slides, but they are not marketing. You see, communication is telling people stuff. But what? It's what you tell them. You can have the best social media strategy in the world. Plenty of companies out there will come in and do a nice social media package for you. But what is it you're going to say? I sometimes sum up marketing in 3 words. And I got these 3 words from watching the Olympics a couple of years back. And you know, in the Olympics, we all watch sports we wouldn't at any other time. And what amazed me about things like archery was that the guys don't just stand up there and let fly with their arrow and hope for the best. They do 2 things, first of all. One, they get ready. They get their stance ready. They get their positioning ready. They check the equipment is right. They get everything spot on. Then they look to see where their target is, how far away it is. Are there any prevailing conditions like crosswinds or something like that that could maybe variate the arrow? They take all these factors into account before releasing it, because they know that gives them the maximum opportunity, the maximum chance to connect with their target. And you know what? Business is no different. Business is no different. You have to get ready for the marketplace. You release, which is money and time, all your social media, all your websites, all your brochures, all your PR is released, and you don't quite connect with the target audience. And if that happens, you've had it. You're in real trouble. And just like in archery, if you miss the target, you can't exactly go and say, can I have my arrow back and have another go, please? Likewise here, if you've spent your money and spent all your time, you can't go and ask for your money back. So it's much better to get the ready aim part right before you unleash all these channels of communication. And they are the basics that Hugh mentioned at the beginning, and the basics of which today, over the next 45, 50 minutes, I would like to cover with you. As you know, I do some work with some of the NHS trusts, and I'd like to just give you one example of connection, and this is what I'm really aiming at. I have done for the last 10 years, I've worked with this NHS trust. We've developed right through, and we're in the middle of doing a big campaign now. 2 years ago, there was a problem with MRSA. We probably remember it. It was headline news virtually every day. And what was happening was that people were coming in, and unfortunately, when they came in, they were carrying germs with them. And one of the ways to prevent that happening was to try and make them clean their hands as they entered the hospital building. This particular trust at the main entrance had 2 of these hand gel pump type things either side of the entrance. And what was happening was nobody was stopping. They were just flooding in. And I was asked by one of the directors, they said, John, you know about marketing, how do we solve that? And I said, well, first of all, I have to think about the target audience, the people coming through the door. I have to understand them. So I went down to the main entrance and I stood, and for about half an hour, I watched people coming in. And people were just so blinkered, they were just walking straight past the pumps. And eventually, after watching this for a period of time, I approached 1 or 2 and I said, excuse me, can I just ask you, you've just walked past those hand pumps that can clean your hands and help prevent MRSA. And they said, oh, right, I never saw them. I said, well, can I ask you, if I had a member of staff, let's say a senior nurse, that's a matron, let's say a senior nurse standing there saying, excuse me, just before you come in, would you be terribly kind just to wash your hands? It will help protect your relatives, our patients and our staff. Would you do it? And every single person said, yes, of course we would do it. Now I began to understand them. I began to understand that it wasn't that they didn't respect the authority, they did. They just didn't see it. So what I did was, to make the connection, we took a life-size cardboard cutout. Have you ever been in these food stores where you walk around one of the aisles and they've got one of these life-size models of their policemen standing there? Have you seen that? Where they actually, it's to prevent shoplifting. I live in Benton, and there's a story that last year, apparently, there was a shoplifter, and what they stole was the big cardboard cutout policeman walking out the door with it, which I think is just classic. So what we did was that. We produced a life-size model of a modern matron, and we had this as a pop-up banner. And we put one either side of the door, stopping people, saying, look, before you come in, please clean your hands. The effect was absolutely dramatic. Dramatic, because first of all, it stopped them. Secondly, the unit, the authority of the nurse made them stop, and they did it. And it happened to such an extent that within 4 days, they had completely run out of gel. So this is what I mean about making a connection with your target audience. And to do it, you need to really understand them, not just identify them. So let me get back to my original question, what is marketing? Well, I've told you what I don't think it is. So what is it? Well, the clue's in the name, obviously. It's the marketplace. And for me, when I ask people what business they're in, sometimes people will give me the kind of answers you've done. I was at one yesterday where somebody said, I'm in IT. What the heck does that mean nowadays, IT? That could be anything from website design to software to whatever. That's not enough. I need to know what specific area or segment of that market you're in, because it's only when you understand that everything else begins to flow. And that will pick up who your product or service is aimed at. To give you a quick example, a silly example of what I mean by what segment, because marketing people love phrases like market segmentation. All that means is you take any industry and you break it into little boxes and you decide which box you're going to be in. So let me give you a silly example. The newspaper marketplace, the newspaper industry. The Financial Times proudly know where they stand in the newspaper industry marketplace. They know they're pretty much at the top end. They know that everything they speak about is to do with financials. They know the target readership that will appeal to. And so they begin to use language and photography and even adverts. I don't know if you can see just down at the bottom there, Harry Winston watches. Well, you ladies will probably know Harry Winston diamonds. So the Harry Winston watch is a really upmarket brand name. So they know that will appeal to their readership because that's the area of the market they're in. And look at the language they use. Signaled, recovery takes hold. You know, they use this language and they're not scared to put 10 words in a headline. They're very much, that's where they are. Now, also in the newspaper industry, of course, we have at a slightly different end of the market, the Daily Star. And the Daily Star, they lead with invasion of the mutant killer rats. Fantastic. And that's not enough. Look underneath. They're French super rodents. And even that's not enough. They're immune to poison and they've now arrived in the UK. They know that their readers will love that. And then they think, what else can we do? Footy. Footy's always good. Put some football in it. And then what else? Let's have scantily clad ladies. So they have knickers down at Marks and Sparks. And then instead of Harry Winston watches, they have Carpet Madness, 70% off. You see, what they do is they know that for their readership, that's what they want. And they know them, they know what they think, they know the language they like. So this is why I'm saying, once you know the segment of the marketplace you're in, everything else begins to flow out from there. What then separates you from somebody else is where we have this word, the brand. And when I say here, you must have one, I say that because sometimes people say to me, you know what, I've just started in business as a joiner or a plumber. You know, I don't think having a brand is quite for me. Excuse me, yes it is. Not only should you have one, you must have one. You absolutely must have a brand. Now, if we go on to explain in a minute what the brand is all about, you will understand. You see, brand is not a new word, it's not a trendy new word. Brand comes from the Norse word, brandre. Brandre means to burn. And if you remember the cowboy films where they brand their cattle, why do they do that? Simply to differentiate one herd from another. They're all cattle, but with a different branding on, now you know which one's which. Business is no different. Your brand separates you from the other people who are in the same segment or may do the same product or service as you. And so to have a brand is not a luxury, it's an absolute necessity. Every one of you must have a brand. It then gets a little bit confusing. Again, my industry's fault, because we then speak about branding, and people then think, well, is that the same as branding? And just to avoid any confusion, I'm sure you know what it is, but just a very simple way I use to explain the difference between the two. For me, if you compare it to a human being, your brand is what's inside you. It's your heart, your soul, your passion. It's your world. It is, in fact, your DNA. It's what makes you, you. Now, we all have a unique DNA, each one of us. We all have our own individual personalities. Your business must be exactly the same. You must compare it to a human being. You need to have your world. When I touch your world, what is it? What do I enter into? What makes you very special and very unique and very different? And this is the critical building blocks, as Hugh mentioned at the beginning, quite rightly. Before you get into social medias and everything nowadays, let's get the building blocks right. So from there, we go on to what the brand does is, especially if you're in a marketplace where there's other people doing very similar things, you need something that helps you stand out, and that is what I would call your brand. Now, if we go back to our human beings, the branding is what's on the outside. It's your hair, your makeup, your stylization, jewelry, cosmetics, all of these things. But they are the first thing that people see. They don't know you. When people know you to start with, they don't know who you are. When people see your business to start with, they probably don't know the ethics that you have. They don't know the passion that you have for what you do. They maybe don't even know what your business is about. And that's where sometimes the branding, or if you like, the logo, or if you like, the corporate image, all of that is really the first thing people see. And clearly, obviously, they need to work together in sync. So this is why I say once again, you need to work out not only the industry you're in, the portion of the industry. Look around at who's up against you. Decide what your real heart and soul and DNA, your world is going to be about. And that's the beginnings of really having something solid, something really good. Now, I'm no different. I'm a small business. In fact, I'm a micro business. It's pretty much me. Okay, a couple of other people work with me on the design side of things and what have you, but I had the same journey to go down as you do. I have to decide what segment the marketplace I'm in. And over the years, it's changed a little bit for me, because there is now reckoned to be around about 30,000 people like me in this country, which is a scary bloody thought, I've got to tell you. And the thing is that I have to differentiate who I am. And yes, I can do marketing for very large companies, I do. But I also can do marketing for small business. And over the years, I've kind of gone to the small business area. And I had to then decide, okay, I used to trade as John McCrae Marketing. It's hardly the most innovative name in the world. And I decided maybe I needed to rebrand myself. And so I did what most of us would do to start with. You make the mistake, you ask your friends, what do you think I should rebrand in? My friends are very bad people. They came up with suggestions like 50 Shades of McCrae. It's got a ring to it, mind. But what really helped me form my brand was when I sat at a meeting in this great city that we're in today. And it was a meeting which was chaired by, remember, One Northeast and the business links, the way they used to be? And they said they had a problem, which was that approximately 1 out of 2 startup businesses will die before year 3. And in our region, it was reckoned that it was edging towards 2/3. That's terrible. You know what it's like, your business, you know, your business is part of you. It's not just your money you put into it, it's you put into it. And so when that goes wrong, it's horrific. And at this meeting, we were all asked, different disciplines, we were all asked, you know, would we go away and look at our own area of expertise and what could we do to try and help that? So I went and I did, with their assistance, market research. We spoke to about 50 companies. And these were by startup to 1 year, 2 year companies. And I said to them, first question, do you think marketing's important? And everybody said yes, pretty much. So then I said, okay, you all think marketing's important. Where do you get your marketing knowledge from? Have you got, for example, a qualification, a degree? Majority hadn't, fair enough, you wouldn't expect that necessarily. Have you read a book on marketing? 70% said no, and of the rest, not one single person I came across had finished the book. Interesting. And then I said, well, do you do a marketing course or an online tutorial? And again, the majority hadn't. So when I said to them, well, this is bizarre. You know, you think it's so important, and yet you're not really doing much. Why not? Why not read a book? And here's what they said, 2 things. One, that they weren't relevant. They weren't relevant. I said, what do you mean? They said, well, we can't relate to examples like Coca-Cola and Microsoft. You know, we're a one-man micro business. We can't relate to that. And secondly, they're boring. And I began to realize that there was this problem that if things were not relevant and boring, people weren't going to engage with it. And if people didn't engage with it, they're not going to get the benefits that potentially there are. And so I decided to rebrand as stand-up marketing. It's pretty much just me, so stand-up. There's a degree of humour in what I do. And my branding then became these kind of theatre lights that you would see, and the T of stand was the microphone and the A was the stool, and on the back of that I put the website. If you haven't seen it, you'll know that the stand-up marketing's all animated. There's 2 new sections going up just in 2 weeks' time, so I'm sorry it's a bit bare at the moment. The video is of me as a stand-up comic coming on stage saying, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, a great show for you. It's going to be great, fantastic. This is the opening. And I look around and there's nobody in the auditorium. It's completely empty. And I say, business can be like that. You've got this great idea, but if you get ready, fire, aim, not ready, aim, fire, you end up with an empty auditorium, no customers. That's no good. And you can see the kind of style of it. But that's all designed to pull people through. I even then took a book out on the back of it, which helped develop my brand, and all aimed at the small business. And I even now sometimes do evening stand-up comedy shows, which are not like this, they're proper more stand-up, but for the business community and for a charity. So I don't do it to make money, I don't do it to be a stand-up comedian, I'll never be that. I'm somebody who's passionate about small businesses growing and not going out. I want to help the odds. So we do that. It's a great networking evening. As I say, a lot of the business community come to it, and we always do it for a charity. We charge nothing, we just cover the expenses. So this is me developing my brand, and I know you had intellectual property the other week, so just to let you know, I try and take the limited name, the trademarks, and also the dot whatever. Now, don't worry if you can't get a .com or .co.uk for your business. Please remember there's lots of new domain tags coming out. Everything from .book to .football to .scotland to .whatever. So you may still pick one up, and now is a good time to go on and put new domain names into Google. There's lots of websites that will show you all the different domain tags that are coming up over the next year or so, and you may be able to bag one that is more, better for your company name rather than have to put hyphens and things in. So that's me. Now, coming on to you then, what I want to know if you're my client is, why is your offering different? Or if you say, look, I'm a milkman, and one milkman's the same as another milkman. Okay, maybe then it's not what you do, it's the way you do it that might be different. And that is perfectly acceptable for your brand, but only if that difference has a benefit to your target customers. This was a company, they had invested in mangoes. Now, by mangoes, what I'm speaking about here is mango pulp. And not just general mangoes that you can get all year round. These are what's called the very king of mangoes, Alfonso mangoes. They're the kind of ones at Marks and Spencer's and Sainsbury's at certain times of the year stock. And these they import from India and they pulp them and put them in aluminium pouches. Now, when I went to see them, I said, right, clearly you have a problem. Just tell me, first of all, is it an upper, which segment of the market? And they said, very much premium end. And I said, who are you hoping to sell it through? And they said, UK supermarket chains. So the first target audience was the store buyers. That's the target they've got to convince. So they have to put themselves in the position of that target and see their presentation through those eyes. So I said, well, what's happened? And when I got there, they said, well, we've had one major supermarket buyer, and within 15 minutes, we were out the door with no interest. I said, okay, let's go a little bit further. Tell me now what you describe your company as when you went to see them. And they said, well, we told them we were a UK startup company, and we told them that we were an agro, this is on their business card, agro trading company importing from India. Now, when I look at those two things, I begin to think to myself, if I was a buyer, let's say, give me any store, because I don't want to mention the chain store I'm actually speaking about here. Give me any one. Waitrose. Waitrose, thank you. Let's say it's the Waitrose buyer. If I'm a Waitrose buyer, I don't want to put my neck in the line for a brand new startup company. It's too risky. So right away, that's a huge negative. As for agro trading, it makes it sound like he's got a mate over in Bombay that could do a few mangoes, mate. It's a bit like the Del Boy thing. It just doesn't sound quite credible. And then I said, okay, tell me then how you sell the actual product. And he showed me his presentation. It was 5 points on it. There they are. I've just copied it verbatim. It's in pulp form. It's 100% natural. Party of 5 a day. No E numbers. And rather bizarrely, same fat as a bag of crisps. As you can tell, I went for the crisp option rather than the mango option. And I said, you know what? I said, if I was the store buyer, I'm just not getting the reasons to say yes. You're not really connecting with me. So that was the outcome. There was no credibility, no connection, and therefore no sale. And I said, let's start again. I said, please tell me where you actually source your mangoes from. And the answer came back, unbelievably, from our orchard. What do you mean, your orchard? Well, our family own the orchard. Your family own an orchard? How long has this been going on? He said, well, about 100 years. In other words, they are not an agro trader startup company. They are mango farmers with a 100-year heritage in producing the prime mangoes of Alfonso mangoes. And why open a new startup company? And he said, well, because we thought it would be nice to support UK supermarkets by having a base in the UK, because that's a big market we're going for. How great is that? But they didn't say it. They didn't say it because they didn't put themselves in the position of the buyer. Suddenly that makes sense. Suddenly now, instead of it being a negative, that's quite a credible thing. And there he is, 100-year farmer. So his new introduction is, I'm very pleased to meet you. I'm a mango farmer with a 100-year heritage. And there he is standing in his mango farms. And to let you know how much supermarket buyers like that, this is Marks and Spencer out in Silverlink. I just captured this on my phone the other day. They've got 115 years they've been building strawberries, and M&S love that, so they've put that up front. So it shows that what he had was now along the right lines. Then we had a quick look at the product benefits, and I said, you speak about natural mango pulp, so what? And he said, well, it's the first one ever. I said, the first? Now you can imagine store buyers love a first. If they've got the credibility that this company's okay, a first is then a feather in their cap. And it is the first. There's no sugar in it, there's no preservatives, it's pure natural mango pulp. Second thing was the flavour. Well, you can imagine when you start putting sweeteners and preservatives into things like that, the taste is pretty awful. They skim the mangoes, pulp it, and it's sealed all within 5 hours, 5, 6 hours. So it's very fresh when you open it. Second one, Alfonso mangoes, not other types of mangoes, but just Alfonso mangoes, are only available 2 months a year. That product is now available 12 months a year for his customers. The shelf life, bear in mind the buyer, 10 days for the natural fruit, 18 months for that. So as a buyer, he's got plenty of time to get rid of the stock. He doesn't have to panic about slashing prices. And finally, convenience. It's quite a hard fruit to work with, as you probably know. It's got the big stone in it. Whereas over there, you just open it and you can mix it to lots of things. When he went back and represented that, and again, I must confess I was there, the guy immediately said, "Why didn't you tell us this the first time?" And he said, "Well, yeah, the answer's yes." And then he said, "Have you spoken to anybody else yet? We want 2 months before you speak to MD else." Suddenly now he's interested. But it's the same company, the same product. Now the difference is we understand the target audience. We think like the buyer when we present it to them. Once you've done all of that, and you're pretty near to having your completed brand, I beg of you, please, 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 just validate it. Just do a little bit of market research. Even though you're in the industry, I would nevertheless just check it out. And please check it out. 4 rules here, 4 rules. 1, don't go to your friends, go to the actual representatives of the target market. See it through their eyes and speak to them and only them. Secondly, please remember to add a price. Don't just say, "I've got this new product or service, we think it's for you, what do you think?" "Oh, it's great, yeah, I'll have that, wonderful." No, it isn't. He doesn't know how much it is. So give a price. Or if you're not sure what price, ask them, "What would you pay for that?" And it's amazing how people give you this information. Number 3, for existing businesses, I beg of you to do this. Work as hard as you can to dialogue with your existing customers and ask them for their feedback. This is a client of mine up in Northumberland. It's Howick Hall Gardens. It's a tourist attraction, beautiful gardens and an arboretum. It's a fabulous place. We introduced a card in there a few years back, and maybe you can't read it, but basically it just says, out of 10, how did you find X, Y, and Z? Now, why that's important is 2 things. 1, next year, at the end of each year, we collate the cards. Last year, I think it was 800 people filled out the cards. From that, we knew that the tea room had a 90% satisfaction rating, which is pretty good. If, however, this year, at the end of 1 month, they get the cards in, and that rating has gone to 40%, that's a red flag warning. Something's gone wrong. They've maybe changed the menu. They maybe changed the chef. They maybe put the prices up. So by getting feedback and benchmarking it against what you had previously done, you can find out some amazing things. And customers, by and large, like to be consulted. So that's rule number 3. Rule number 4 in market research, and I'm going to apologize for this slide before it comes up. It's from my book, sorry. This is all to do with an old expression that says that your mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work unless it's open. So of course me, rather than just say that, I've done this completely ridiculous thing where I've got my lunch kit in my bag pretending I've jumped out of a plane in my suit. And can I tell you, that was done in Photoshop and I couldn't walk for 2 days afterwards, but never mind. Now the whole point about keeping an open mind is this. Once you have got a concept in your head for a product or a service, it's part of you. It's your baby. It's what you want, it's what you believe. It's very hard to be really open to criticism. And yet you have to be, because it's better at that stage to rethink it and think, you know, the target audience are saying this is not quite right. I beg of you, stop and think of that. Don't just push on ahead, because there's danger if you do.